the Menagerie. Let's talk about some movies.
2023 is over and there's some good things coming in 2024, but let's kick this off with one that doesn't have such a positive outlook on the future. Sam Esmail dropped one of the biggest releases on Netflix this year, Leave the World Behind, starring super talents Julia Roberts, Ethan Hawke, and Mahershala Ali. Still have my fingers crossed for Mahershala's Blade, but it's not looking too good. Anyway, Esmail and cinematographer Todd Campbell bring over the unconventional thirds framing with unabashed negative space from Mr. Robot, as well as inexplicable set design. For example, the paintings in the house change over time, and even the bedroom wallpaper shows a rising flood, foreshadowing the impending doom. That said, the camera did feel like it moved around too much sometimes, and if there was ever a window pane, you bet your ass it was going to impossibly fly through it. However, Esmail wonderfully builds tension in the first and second acts through scenes of implied racism, clever misdirection, and isolated locations. The film definitely touches on some very plausible real-life frightening situations that a lot of us, in the United States at least, could be experiencing in the near future, thanks mostly to our over-reliance on technology and a crumbling infrastructure in a country run by corporate overlords. If you can't tell, I like this movie, even if it is a bad omen. I really wanted to like this follow-up from La La Land and First Man director Damien Chazelle, even after hearing the mixed reviews. I thought maybe people just didn't really get it, you know? Maybe audiences and critics just couldn't grasp the vision. But yeah. This one just sadly takes a big swing and strikes out. To start, there's an Ace Ventura level opening scene that even if you're into poopy fart joke humor, it's hard to swallow. From there, things do keep moving at a cocaine-induced pace, but despite the grand scale and opulence shown on screen, the ends never really justify the 3-hour runtime. Margot Robbie is of course great as an aspiring actress with severe addiction problems, but the story overall of Diego Calva's character falling in love with Robbie's self-destructive starlet in the Land of Temptation somehow still wasn't compelling, especially when Nellie barely acknowledges Manny at all for the majority of the film. There are also a lot of repetitive shots, recreations of scenes from other movies, and a straight-up 3-minute montage of film history fellatio that drifts beyond a tasteful homage into YouTube compilation territory. Babylon just tries a little too hard to be perceived as a cinematic masterpiece set during a glamorous and conveniently primarily white time in Hollywood. I think there are 3 things that went wrong with this one. 1, it came out while the pandemic was barely ending in people's minds. 2, Damien Chazelle maybe should have tackled a more grounded and less ambitious movie not set in the film industry before this, to give some more time between La La Land. And 3, a little trimming and it could have been a tighter story to be less of a pastiche of past masters. Now that Wonka's out, I can finally talk about it. I saw an early screening during production, and while it was missing most of the VFX and some reaction shots, I could feel the very sincere and silly tone Paul King was going for with his young, hot Wonka, Timothée Chalamet. I gotta admit, seeing the crowd go insane for Timmy at the premiere really demonstrated his star power, especially amongst the younger female demographic. So that, plus holiday season family time, made this the biggest box office return out of Warner Bros. 3 releases in December. Although personally, The Color Purple is my favorite out of the 3. As for Wonka, this is the most sanded down and, dare I say, vanilla version of a Willy Wonka movie thus far. And Tim Burton's Johnny Depp version definitely brings that potentially psychopathic element to their Wonka world, but this is a much more Disney-fied version that eliminates all sense of mystery by making Willy straight up magical and his nemesis a stretched out fat joke. Unfortunately, Keegan-Michael Key, despite being a much needed sugar rush on screen, isn't enough to save this recipe. Also, give little people jobs if we're gonna have Oompa Loompas. Just listen to Brad Williams.
Get me started on the new movie that comes out this week, frickin' Wonka, because they took away the Oompa Loompas and they gave it to Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant is an Oompa Loompa.
What's the beef with dwarves?
Apparently it's offensive to certain people when dwarves play dwarves.
How is that?
I don't know. I want to get paid.
Moving on. Unlike Wonka, Super Mario Bros. Is a brightly colored, candy-coated capitalism delivery vehicle that, despite its simplicity and pandering, is a successful crowd pleaser. Probably one of the best rendered movies in this modern animation style of 3D CGI, the visuals are on par with any Pixar movie, so it's clear Nintendo didn't want a repeat of this disaster.
They must rescue the princess.
Even for older Mario superfans, I'm guessing that they were pretty satisfied with how this turned out, regardless of a strange voice stunt cast featuring Chris Pratt, Charlie Day, and Anya Taylor-Joy. They all did fine, but there's probably some unknown voice actors that would have put a little more experience and nuances, whereas most celebrities just do their own voice or slightly altered versions. And speaking of, I'm going to take this second to get on my soapbox. He's not in this movie, but Hollywood, please stop casting Patton Oswalt as animated characters, especially in high-profile IP, because he only does his voice.
Oh, my ears!
I think it's apparent that I need to rethink my life a little bit.
A couple hours ago, I apparently died in my sleep, and now I'm a bird. I used to have thumbs.
Oh, no one took the cans out?
Do you go in like one day a year and just do them all?
I digress. Jack Black, of course, steals the show, and I think, like most nerds, I really hope this one day leads to a Super Smash Bros. Movie. It's probably been said before, but if they can give a lot of those characters their own movies in different genres and animation styles, like, what if Samus from Metroid was in a PG-13 sci-fi thriller? Or a Miyazaki-style Legend of Zelda? I think the world would be a better place. To do a quick 180 from the family-friendly to the dysfunctional family, Poor Things is the newest absurdist surrealism film from Yorgos Lanthimos. That sentence was a mouthful. Like his previous film, this features unpopular filmmaking techniques from fisheye lenses to intentionally stiff and stilted performances. However, this is probably his most unique and elevated film yet. The world building, set design, and overall premise is a refreshingly original and much needed bit of weirdness that Hollywood is capable of, but rarely takes chances on. Emma Stone gives probably her best, albeit an uncomfortably infantile performance while also exuding sexuality. She walks through a patriarchal world reborn without the social cues of polite society. I'll be honest, I was a little mixed on this at first because it has that intentionally awkward and unsettling tone that only Lanthimos can pull off, but ultimately this feminist Frankenstein parable is just the kind of original movie-making monster that cinema desperately needs every now and then. Everyone seems like they just had a blast making this movie, and I'm just happy to see Rami Youssef pop up in anything. I definitely plan on rewatching and would recommend it, especially to any fans of the A24 oeuvre. Now before you leave, just give me a chance here. I know this isn't exactly highbrow art, but it's got style, even if that style is basically a Tarantino, Tony Scott, and Guy Ritchie ripoff. But one of the best things Hollywood can do is get a bunch of famous people together for a loud and obnoxious action film. I've never been a Fast and the Furious person, but this is the kind of cheesy nonsense that I enjoy. You could even say this is a precursor in ways to films like Hotel Artemis, John Wick, and Bullet Train. Because Smokin Aces is about a bunch of hitmen going after one target who is locked away in a Las Vegas penthouse. The stacked cast is full of lovable favorites like Taraji P. Henson, Chris Pine, and Ryan Reynolds, as well as some surprise guest stars like Common and Alicia Keys. The humor wasn't really that good for the time of 2006 and didn't age any better, but this is what you might call a guilty pleasure, because it's like a McDonald's cheeseburger. Sure, there's better options, but this is fast, cheap, and tastes good enough, especially if you're drunk. I watched another star-studded crime movie because I'm a simple man. Guy Pearce, Russell Crowe, and some other guy headline this clever noir-inspired ode to the 1950s LA criminal justice scene. Much like Chinatown, the plot centers around a conspiracy that eventually unveils corruption within the city's government, while also entangling our heroes in a scandalous love triangle. Whereas Chinatown has a little more gravitas, mostly achieved through Jack Nicholson's performance and Roman Polanski's more dramatic tone, LA Confidential has a more kitschy, tongue-in-cheek vibe that almost but never truly drifts into comedy, especially thanks to Danny DeVito's overzealous tabloid editor. Also, I forgot this was set at Christmas, so this is technically the only Christmas movie I watched in December. The writing is well done, but if you're looking for likable characters, spoilers, our supposed hero eventually falls, and even Bud White, the man who rightfully beats the crap out of abusers, is a gruff, racist cop that shoots unarmed black men and assaults detained Hispanic inmates. Sadly, the scene is a dramatization of the real-life Bloody Christmas of 1951, wherein 50 officers beat 6 inmates for an hour and a half. I think that's part of my dissonance with this film because not only does it use real-life tragedy while also being a soap opera-like noir, it has comedic moments and jokey performances interwoven. The way some scenes look is one of my few nitpicks, but as director Curtis Hanson says, our goal with LA Confidential was to be faithful to the period without telling the story through a lens of nostalgia. For that reason, cinematographer Dante Spinelli opted for a high-key lighting, like his work in Heat versus the contrast moody noir style of John Seitz or Greg Toland. According to the ASC.com, Spinelli was inspired by photographer Robert Frank's 1958 book, The Americans, that captures protests and frontline imagery from the civil rights movement. One of many movies about corrupt cops in LA based on true stories. It's almost like we don't train police long enough or good enough. Anyway, moving on. If you didn't know, because trailers these days like to hide it, The Color Purple is a musical remake of the 1985 non-musical drama. While that might sound like a bad idea, it actually works really, really well. Fantasia, Taraji P. Henson, and Danielle Brooks portray three black women in the early 1900s struggling to survive through racial, social, and sexual abuse. Due to the thematic weight of the story, I didn't expect the film to move at such a quick pace as I found myself swept up in the songs while also being moved to tears. It's not all heavy though, as Danielle Brooks provides some unapologetic, boastful energy while also getting to showcase some legit acting chops, especially compared to her straight-up comedic work in Peacemaker. Taraji also steals every scene she's in as Suge Avery, and Fantasia gives a heartbreaking performance as a sweet soul taken advantage of by the men in her life. And there's even a nice little cameo that I won't spoil. For his third outing, director Blitz Bazawule did a fantastic job taking the reins from Steven Spielberg with a completely refreshing vision. If you're going to live in a world of mostly remakes and sequels, this is the way to do it. Finally, I know I call this the monthly movie Menagerie, but I'm going to cheat a little this month since it's the end of the year and give a shout out to a couple TV shows. We're living in a crazy, wonderful world of animation, and not just on the big screen with this year's Across the Spider-Verse, TMNT Mutant Mayhem, and the aforementioned Super Mario Bros., but also at home in long-form, serialized storytelling. There's a lot I haven't seen, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Scavenger's Reign on Max and Blue Eye Samurai on Netflix. Both are extremely well-done animated series for adults, and I say adults because they are both bloody, sexual, and thought-provoking. Scavenger's Reign is a sci-fi thriller about astronauts stranded on a distant planet with visuals and settings that are reminiscent of Mobius artwork. And that's all I'll say about that one, which I absolutely loved. I was telling my friends, basically, imagine if the weird parts of Rick and Morty were played seriously instead of for laughs. Blue Eye Samurai is a little more traditional Ronin revenge tale, but a sweeping epic set in feudal Japan with awesome action scenes that's beautifully animated is pretty rare, so I definitely recommend both. There's a ton more TV that I loved, like Swarm, Beef, Gen V, and Loki Season 2, and even more that I missed or need to catch up on, so that's what I'm gonna go do.